One of the things I learned from that show is just that everybody on that show, the relentless grind that they just the pursuit of excellence, what they were trying to go for over and over and over again.
Well, first, I have to start by telling you how much I love Extended Family. Um, for a show about divorce, it is literally so wholesome. I like like it's great. So I of course need to ask you, where did the idea for this come from? What inspired you to create it?
I was born in Boston. I grew up in New Hampshire. I'm representing the University of New Hampshire right here today. Uh, I'm a big Celtics fan, Patriots fan. Sorry to anybody who hates those teams, and Red Sox fan. And the owner of the Boston Celtics, Wick Grousbeck, this is based on his life. And I had met him through Tom Werner, a great television producer. And he said, well, look, we think that there is a television show based on the premise of our lives, which is Wick Grousbeck married a woman named Amelia Fazzolari. She's CEO of Cincoro Tequila. If you like tequila, get it. It's amazing. And Amelia was married to a guy named George Gear. They had two kids, and they got divorced, and they wanted to get divorced. There, as George and Amelia said, the relationship had run its course, but they didn't want to have this antagonistic divorced life where this disruption and discord ended up sowing all this resentment between people. And so they decided to retain the apartment. They live in New York City, to retain the apartment where the kids were growing up, and the parents would each go and get their own places. Now, listen, this is obviously not everyone can afford three different apartments to make this happen. But the idea that we want to keep the physical disruption for the kids to a minimum, so that the kids weren't, getting their backpack and their carry-on, luggage and moving it from place to place every Sunday night or every Friday night, moving from one parent's place to the next one because they're sharing custody. They decided, here, whatever house you grew up in, your parents get divorced, you stay there. Your parents are the ones who come and go in a bedroom, but your lives aren't disrupted physically. Now, certainly emotionally they are. And that's one of the things that I thought when I was there, they were talking about this, like, it's great. We call the place where the kids live the nest. The parents are the bird, father and mother birds who come and go, but the kids stay in the nest. That's all well and good. But it's not like it's also you're sort of glossing over the fact that you're getting divorced. I mean, I know in concept, it'd be like, well, it's just like dad is gone on a work trip this week and mom has gone on a work trip the next week. There's still a reason that mom and dad haven't got along, and what do they have to get through? So we just thought I thought that this was an interesting premise for a sitcom because I hadn't seen it before. One of the things about sitcoms, just in the way that they are produced and that they need to be produced, is that you need stories coming in the same sets every week. It's at the bar at Cheers, or it's at Seinfeld's apartment, or the friend's apartment, or it's on Raymond. Here's the house and the parents, are across the street. When people get divorced, they don't want to be around each other all the time. And so I just thought this was an interesting premise, that the parents are coming and going and what happens on those days.
I'm curious what you were looking for in chemistry reads, if you did them, because you're matching Julia with her ex-husband, who she's still very close to, as well as the man she currently loves. So what did you guys do when you were casting? What were you looking for?
Well, we were looking for a star who could bring attention to the show and who wanted to do it, because the network would green light the show if John Cryer wanted to do it. Susan Rovner, who worked with John for many years over at Warner Brothers when he was doing Two and a Half Men, loved John, and John wanted to come back and do a sitcom. And so Susan Rovner was at that time running NBC, and she said, I want to find something for John. And independently, we had not developed this with John. We were working on this, and they liked the premise of it and they liked the execution of it. And so they offered the role to John, he said yes. Then once that happened, we auditioned, many people for the role of Julia, and Abigail Spencer had a fantastic uh, chemistry audition with John where she won the part. She was up for the part against a couple other people who were also excellent, but she just really crushed it. And then Donald Faison, who of course famously had been on Scrubs on NBC for over a decade. They loved him, and he has such a winning personality, and it's just so much fun. He came in and read with Abigail and John, and we offered the part to him. I mean, he got the offer too. So, you have these two comedy veterans, and then you have another veteran who has come more from the dramatic world, but who was really up for doing this kind of a project. And you can see that she's the kind of woman who, for Donald Faison's character, he's the owner of the Celtics. Well, why would he put up with the nonsense of a John Cryer, Jim's character? It would have to be a pretty spectacular woman. So, Julia for him is his Helen of Troy.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because my favorite part of the show is actually the Jim and Trey relationship. So how do you find that balance between them being put off by one another, but also having that genuine care for each other at the end of the day?
Right. It's a great question. And I think it's probably the most challenging part of the show, is that ultimately we have to get to a place where these guys are great friends and they like each other independent of Julia, so that it's not unlike, I think many people know this in their, as they get older, your brother or your sister, or somebody that you marry, your wife's brother or sister, you like, as friends because they're in your family. So like, my brother-in-law, Jim, for example, he married my sister before I got married to my wife, Lisa but he's a great guy, and he's in my family, even though we're not blood related. He's the father of my nephews, the father of my godson. He's a guy who I love to spend time with. And, because we're in this larger extended family. I think where the relationship needs to get to is that these guys would not be in each other's lives were it not for this situation of this divorce, right? But Julia's not going away from her kids. She's going to be in a relationship with her kids, and Julia wants the relationship with her children, with Jim, to be thriving too. She doesn't want to sow seeds of discord and resentment that, and parental alienation with Jim. And so, because yes, she wants to have love and she wants to be in a relationship, her top priority is to be a mom first. That's what we have to get to. It's like everybody wants the best for these kids, because the kids are the people who need direction and guidance and balance and ballast, on top of balance. And I think that every one of your listeners or readers or will relate to this idea that if we are the world is complicated enough, and just existing in the world is complicated, and trying to look at, wait a minute, what am I doing? What is this whole place where we've been put on this earth to live? But those who have love and the backstop of a family that believes in you, even though those adults may be as sometimes riddled with questions about their own existence and what this is all about, that if you have love and kindness at the core, okay, people can then go out and face the world. That's what we're trying to write about in this show. I know it doesn't sound comedic on the surface, but that's what we're trying to put underneath it all.
Yeah, well, in one of the more recent episodes, we actually have Julia inserting herself into Jim's love life. I'm personally very curious if you ever wanted there to be any kind of jealousy there, or if you want the series to maintain, there's no romance, but there is still care.
If we think that there's a hint of some attraction or betrayal or longing that either one of them has for the other, I think it undermines the relationship that we're trying to have with that she's trying to have with Trey. So I think that though that might be more well suited in a drama, right? Is there going to be an affair? I think that this is like, we don't want any of this to be anywhere near this show. It doesn't make, come back and find me if we're lucky enough to get, later seasons and we've run out of stories and we want to mess that up. But I think that I think in particular, a sitcom like this, you want to watch and you want to see yourself put in these situations. And ultimately, even though you could have choices that were led by folly, that ultimately you'd come up with, things where people are their best selves.
I know you spent a lot of time on Glee as Bert, and that series has had such a major impact on pop culture. I mean, there's so many memes from the show just to this day. What are your thoughts looking back at your time on that, and how has it affected the work you're doing now?
I love that show. I wish they would reboot it. Maybe Bert can, his house is a place where kids come and they try to, he rents out the room to some young kids who want to be on the Glee Club. I absolutely love that show. I love the cast. I love the writing. I love the experience. I was further enough along in my career to really realize how unique that situation was and how much of just a comet that experience was. One of the things I learned from that show is just that everybody on that show, the relentless grind that the pursuit of excellence, what they were trying to go for over and over and over again. And the joy that people brought to their work. When I was there, I loved, I had most of my scenes were with Corey Monteith and Chris Kofer. And I was just very lucky in that because they were both just great actors and really wanted the material to be great. And yeah, I'll never forget that experience. That was amazing.
Thank you so much for chatting with me, Mike. You were so great to talk to.
Well, thank you, Rachel, for just coming on and being interested in the show and the specificity of your questions. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much.
Of course. I can't wait to see what's next.